everyone, my name is Amina Razvi. I'm the Executive Director of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and we're joined here in sunny California by my colleagues Jason Kibbey, the CEO of Higg Co, and Lewis Perkins, the President of the Apparel Impact Institute. We're here to talk a little bit about the ecosystem vision and our strategic plan for the future.
Hi, I'm Lewis Perkins, and I'm the president at the Apparel Impact Institute, or Aii, and we're the part of the ecosystem that helps brands and manufacturers scale their environmental solutions. We identify, fund, scale, and measure best-in-class programming to reach your environmental goals.
My name is Jason Kibbey, and I am the CEO of Higg Co. Higg Co was spun out of the SAC in May of 2019, and we are a technology and data company that supports, implements, and rolls out the Higg Index on a technology platform.
Yeah, it's really interesting, I think, trying to develop a strategic plan in the midst of a pandemic and doing it remotely. I think when we started this, we really thought we were going to get together and jump into a room and whiteboard and have all of this great conversation. And once the pandemic hit, it was a little bit about, okay, how do we do this and how do we collaborate and really, kind of work through the strategic plan. But I was really pleasantly surprised that we were able to do it all virtually, all via Zoom, and have some really great conversations about what we thought was necessary and what was needed and how we really move this work forward. But what about you guys? What did you think about the process? And I'm sure it wasn't ideal, but I feel like we came to a really great outcome.
I think it's also important to remind everyone who maybe doesn't know us as well that we've actually known and worked with each other for many years. I think Lewis and I first sat together on a panel on a stage 10 or 11 years ago. And Amina and I, we've worked together since your days at Gap almost eight years ago. And I think that one of the things that really allowed us to work so well together is we've just got great histories working together, collaborating, and we brought that together to make a good plan.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I found the process to be a lot easier than I thought because I think prior to this pandemic, the use of digital tools to try to do all of our work was something we probably wouldn't have attempted. But I think some of the marathon sessions that we had working on the ecosystem strategy together were very effective. And I think I've learned a lot about how we can do this more efficiently and effectively as well as we look to build these types of tools and these types of strategies together.
Yeah, I was also just really appreciative of how we were able to, we know each other, but how we were able to really build off of each other and move this work forward. We had some really great conversations, and what I loved is that it was super additive, right? I would say something, Lewis would say something, Jason would say something. Jason's always scribbling in his book, and you never know if he's like writing a grocery list or writing good ideas, but normally they're really good ideas, and he would say, hey, I love what you said there, and here's the build. And for me, that was really exciting, but that's the part I really love about collaboration, right? Is how you work together and how you build on each other and how you have this great camaraderie, but all this teamwork that allows you to really push the envelope. And I thought we did a really good job of pushing each other and building on each other to come up with something that I think is really ambitious.
I think what I'm most excited about with the vision that you've shared is I look at how Aii can really help serve this role for SAC members is being able to lean into the identified programs that we can help scale together. In order to achieve some of these really ambitious targets, it's going to have to happen through collective action, working together, co-funding initiatives, and really looking at what are the best proven programs out there and really doing it together. So I'm excited about the future that we can play these two roles together.
Yeah. What about you, Jason?
I see us fitting in 4 different ways. The first is supporting data digitization and insights with actually improving the data collection of the Higg Index and supporting SAC and Apparel Impact Institute with insights on how to improve. The next is with transparency and supporting the members in rolling out transparency to their customers, to the whole industry, and actually creating transparency as a service. Then we want to see how can we improve collective impact and actually support these programs on the ground with good data about how are they improving with the Higg Index. And finally, we want to see how can we integrate these tools both across different tool sets and integrate with the programs that you guys are working on.
I mean, for me, this is really about how we do this together. I think what I'm really excited about is the fact that we've created this ecosystem, and in order to really achieve this big vision, we have to do it together. And so, for me, it's all about how we leverage the data, how we work with Higg Co, not only to improve the tools, but also to really leverage those insights and help inform collective action. So, how we work with Aii is also really important. How we bring our members and bring those programs together and really scale impact is going to be crucial. So for me, I'm really excited because I think all of this knits together in a way in which we are going to be stronger together, and the work that we do together is going to be scaled much more effectively by partnership.
Yeah, I think as I think about the opportunity that we have also to evolve the tools together, because there's going to be feedback loops that are created through all of us and through individual programs and projects that we're scaling at Aii, the ability to be able to use those insights back into helping improving the platform and tools as well is something that I think is going to be really strong benefit to members.
I think we've already seen some interesting ways how that could happen. Like, for example, Aii is also trying to collect the investment data to figure out not only how does the needle move in terms of reduction in carbon or reduction in waters, but how much did it cost, and how can we use that to better inform future investments?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I do think that having this ecosystem work together is also going to allow us to accelerate this work, right? In a way that I think we haven't been able to before. What is incredible to me is that we've built this foundation that allows us to go from here and really scale towards exponential impact in a way that I don't think the industry has seen yet, but is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, for me, I think the challenge was moving out of an agreed upon vision into real details, and I think that's where the work continues. Like we're not done. Like there is an implementation aspect to this that we're working on daily, weekly with each other, with our teams, pulling in sort of our senior leadership teams, pulling in key partners that are important to us. And so I think for me, we all agreed on where we believed the ecosystem could be, and now it was like really going to the next level of it. And I was pleasantly surprised at how we went there together. But I do think this constant need to be kind of looking at how do we implement that, which is the daily work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, it was a little bit on both ends, right? So not just in the details, but also when we were really trying to click up, right? And we had these great conversations, and we were like pushing each other to think about, okay, well, how do we go even further, right? Like how do we be more ambitious, right? And how do we even push ourselves outside of what I think maybe, for myself, maybe what I was a little uncomfortable with. But I was really glad that we were able to kind of push through that and come up with something that was not only aligned, but I think really is going to move the industry forward and be transformational.
I think you get a lot of credit for pushing us and pushing the process, and also pushing it through after it was done. It's one thing to come up with things in a room, and it's another thing to get other stakeholders to buy into it. I think for me, the only thing that was hard is that I think all of us maybe had an expectation that we'd create a vision, and then we'd have these perfect swim lanes, and each of us would do our own separate work. And I think what we realized in this process is that's not the way this work happens. This work is integrated. Virtually everything we do has a technology piece, it has a collaboration piece, it has an investment piece, and we need to continue working together and collaborating and recognizing sometimes there will be overlap. Sometimes we're going to be in things that we need to do together, and that's okay.
I think you make a great point about that, because one of the things that you guys, I think, brought into the strategic framework for me was really thinking through the lens of the coalition and the member journey. And that's been something for the last couple of weeks with my own team. I've been thinking, let's talk a little bit more about what this member journey looks like, because we're not a membership, but we have partners that are members of SAC. And so as we look at through their lens, they're looking at this as a holistic journey. So whether they're picking up the phone and calling Jason or Amina or Lewis, it's kind of one and the same. I want this to be achieved. I want to get my goal accomplished. Which one of you am I working with? And so it means that the ability for us to be fluid and how we kind of do that handoff is something that we're figuring out as well too. And I think that's kind of the beauty of what we've created here is it is separate organizations, but it's very much an interplay between the three and our teams in order to have that holistic member journey experience.
Yeah, and I want to build on that because I couldn't agree more, right? From their perspective, it's, they're not really seeing us as distinct organizations, even though we do, right? They're seeing it as how do we really help and support them in terms of them achieving their goals, right? And there are different components or different roles that we all play. But I think that it totally speaks to how we just really need to collaborate better and deeper together and really figure out what those touch points are and how we help each other. I think that's also, for me, something that's really exciting, right? Is that I look at it and I'm like, oh, great, we've completely, tripled our resources now in terms of what we can bring to bear to this work, right? With AII and with Higg Co and with our staff together. It's great to see how we could leverage each other and actually work together much more deeply than we have to achieve this big vision. Yeah, so, when I remember when we were crafting this vision and, doing wordsmithing and, strategy by, committee or wordsmithing isn't always the best idea, but we had some really good riffs on this, right? Like, is it collective impact? Is it collective action? Is it transformational? We went through all of these words. And it was interesting, I think, when we finally landed on exponential, because at least for me, we all paused and we tried to think of, is there a company out there that is really driving exponential impact? Not incremental impact, not are they actually moving the ball forward, but are they having exponential impact? And for me, I thought that was a real unlock, right? Where we said, no, none of us could really think of a company that was doing that. So for us to have that bold of a vision to say that we're not just trying to, achieve environmental reduction or increase social justice or have incremental impact and move the industry forward little by little, but we're talking about exponential leaps and bounds forward, right? Something that really is transformative and not just, year over year.
Yeah, I think it would be easy to think that you put three Northern Californians in a room together and you come up with the word exponential. I think some of it was also a reaction just to the moment we were in. I think when Corona showed us, oh my God, we're so far from where we need to be. And when you apply that to these environmental and social issues that we find ourselves in right now, that I think this moment provided us with this recognition that exponential was what it was going to take to actually move the needle on these problems that we need to solve in the next 5 to 10 years.
I think that's key. And in some of our previous conversations, we've been talking a lot about the ability to accelerate, to disrupt, to be experimental, to take risks. Fail fast, exponential. These are a lot of terms that we also hear. You mentioned Northern California. These are tech and sort of Silicon Valley-based philosophies as well, too. And I've thought a lot working in this space for a while. We're asking a lot of individual organizations that aren't in the business of solving for climate change, solving for water stewardship, ocean health, biodiversity. We're asking a lot without really applying the same kind of framework we would if we were solving some of these big global issues through the lens of tech or through sort of that Silicon Valley approach. And so I think it's not a coincidence that we find ourselves being drawn towards looking at solving for these issues with how are some of the biggest solving organizations or problem-solving organizations and minds and thinkers in the world, Stanford, MIT, et cetera. How are they approaching this? And I think that is a way in which we're really kind of shifting the way our ecosystem can really lean into that exponential kind of viewpoint of impact.
Lewis, your comments made me think about like what are the examples of that we've seen of exponential impact, and if you look at, say, solar installations or renewable installations. This is something my father worked on in the 1970s. If we had just stayed on that linear curve, we still would have virtually no renewable on the planet. And only in the last 10 years, when we've seen that kind of exponential curve, has it started to make this meaningful dent that's now a real solution to our challenge today. And that's the same kind of thinking and the same kind of growth that we need to apply to the apparel, footwear, and consumer products industries to create real impact.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, Jason, that you brought up is like the current crisis. And I think a lot of people have been hearing the word exponential as it relates to COVID, right? And the number of cases. And one of the things that for me, as we were talking about this earlier, it was like, exponential can be both good and bad. We're seeing how it can have really devastating consequences and devastating effects with regards to this health crisis. But as we were talking about it, we were also talking about, well, what is the potential of that when it's positive, right? What is the potential of that exponential impact when it's for good, right, on the positive side of it? And I think that was a real unlock because we talked about how if we could achieve that, if we could do that even a little bit in terms of the next several years of that exponential impact, that would be hugely fundamental and transformational to the industry. So, for me, it's also contextualized within this, the current context and the current crisis.
Yeah, when you raising this, Amina, reminds me of we talked more specifically about the interconnection in the value chain is really what caused the sort of negative exponential financial impacts. I mean, we saw everything from first the disruption in the supply chains, causing everyone to wonder if they were going to be able to get products. And then it was a demand problem that actually went to those areas where the supply chain problems were no longer there. And those exponential ripples happened very quickly. But I think that question became, well, what if you could use that interconnection, like you were saying, to create essentially good impact instead of see these negative exponential business impacts?
Yeah, and I think how that will play out with the AII side of the ecosystem is also looking at the relationship between a vision of exponential to actually how you scale, and really looking at the role that we can play to say, okay, do we have the right solution to solve for this problem? Do we have the right data insights into where and how we go about it? Do we have access to the right players to build this? Do we bring the right financial model to scale it? And all those things are the unlocks. And so as I think about how do we achieve exponential impact within the AII part of this ecosystem, it's really about being able to look at each individual issue and the ability to say, what is the unlock to scale and what is missing and what is needed? Because I think we recognize that with our ecosystem, we have many of the ingredients and the relationships to bring into this. Now it's how do we create those unlocks, topic by topic, program by program, theme by theme.
Yeah, and I mean, it's such a great point because, we talked about there are unknowns in this plan, right? It is ambitious, but this idea of, how do we get to exponential scale in terms of, companies actually using the tools, each of the tools, or scaling them in their supply chain? How do we go beyond tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3 and beyond? How do we look at collective impact and scaling these programs? And I think this is going to be one of the challenges, but also what is really exciting about this plan, which is for each of these areas, getting to exponential is going to be the thing we have to solve, right? What does that look like? How do we do that? How do we do that together? How do we do that with our members? I don't know that we know all of it. We don't have all the answers, but I think that's going to be the work.
I think as we were developing this, we first and foremost realized that our industry is changing right in front of us, and that many of the companies that we assumed would be fine coming out of a pandemic may not be. We also, I think, realized that this world has changed dramatically, and that the apparel and footwear industry may no longer be able to stand on its own as one sort of separate industry that's different than other consumer products industries. And we're seeing the increased sort of role of large retailers and platforms in shaping this agenda. And I think we have to be honest about that and respond to the market and respond in a way that really helps accelerate our mission.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think when we started the strategic plan, it was right in the midst of the pandemic. And we had a lot of really good conversations at the beginning around just where is the industry now and where is it going and what are the implications going to be and, what does this fallout look like and how do we, what is the role that we then play in terms of building this industry back and building it better. I think that is just at the forefront of how we've created the strategic plan because it's completely informed by that, right? And it is very much in response to what we believe is absolutely necessary and needed for the industry to move beyond where it is and be something different as we evolve. Lewis, what about you?
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I think that for me, this last few months, within the context of the work that we're doing too, has been one to also try to kind of bring out the crystal ball, but at the same time recognize that what you know today is maybe not going to be the truth tomorrow. And so the ability for us to make some predictions and some assumptions around efficiencies and resources amongst ourselves, amongst what the experience may be for some of our partners and members, but at the same time, we have to be able to be flexible within that. For example, I think at Aii, we're thinking now is the time when collective funding and collective action is needed more than ever because resources may be constrained. They may be. And so as we look at, we know they will be, but I think in terms of how that impacts each one of us and our partners and what their day-to-day job looks like in terms of what resources they have available to actually achieve their targets, now is the time when pooling those funds, now is the time when working together in collective action on committees or cohorts, et cetera, and definitely leveraging the same tools and data insights is, I think, even more powerful than before. So to me, it's like a leaning in of how this ecosystem is actually more vital and necessary than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, one of the things we've talked a lot about also as part of this, but even offline, is around agility, right? And how this pandemic, I think, has shown us that everything is changing so fast and so quickly that we just have to be much faster, right? Like we have to be looking ahead. I wonder if you could just elaborate on some of the conversations we've had around speed and around agility and what this means for the work that we do.
I think it's important maybe to set a context for where we're sitting right now. We're in Northern California, which is currently being ravaged by the worst wildfire season perhaps ever in the history of the state. And that's a direct result of climate change. And I think what we've seen from COVID is that the urgency to act is going to be much faster. What we've seen, instead of people retreating from sustainability, which was what happened the last time the economy got bad. I started a sustainable fashion company during the midst of the last recession, and suddenly it got out of vogue. We're actually seeing the opposite happen now, where everyone's speeding up. And so not only do we have to prepare for rapid reduction in climate change, but we need to think about the way that we build our tools for the next issue that's going to be right behind us. And I think that's probably water. We've also seen a huge amount of attention to purchasing practices after, frankly, some bad behavior during the COVID-19 crisis. And we also have to be prepared for that. This industry is moving so fast, and the whole consumer products sphere is moving so fast that we have to be ready not only to adapt to that change, but to really lead that change with great solutions.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely reflected in the strategic plan as we've talked about it. And Lewis, you mentioned that earlier, right? Is that we need to be really thinking about how we work together and how we are much more agile and nimble, how we're learning from the tools and the insights, how we're learning from this work, and just speeding everything up in a way that I don't think that we've done before. I think we've laid the foundation to be able to do that, but it is going to require all of our organizations and the members that we work with in the industry to really kind of pick up the pace a little bit. Not just to deal with the crises that we're in the midst of, whether it's COVID or climate, which is right behind it, but it's also to really demonstrate progress.
I think one thing that we've also seen in having now a sort of fully built up technology company is that we're able to really test new solutions much quicker and much differently. In the past, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition would have years of engagement processes to create a new tool, and sometimes now we can pluck something from the market and put it on our platform and show it to our members in a matter of days now. And that's different. And I think actually using technology and the speed that it can provide us to actually try out new solutions that meet some of these new challenges and opportunities really quickly is just a fundamentally different way of thinking. And I think that was something that we really explored a lot in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it speaks to how this whole ecosystem is going to evolve, right? And how the work that we do and how we actually engage with our members is fundamentally going to have to evolve as well, right? Because it's such a great example of how we could actually test something, iterate rapidly, deploy it, test and iterate again, and continue to actually make progress on these tools and these insights in ways that we haven't been able to before, right? That helps us to drive collective impact and collective action. But it will require that we think about the work differently and that we actually engage with our members and actually our partners much more differently than we have.
Oh, absolutely. I was reminded of that yesterday when one of our partners, Global Fashion Agenda, released a report that basically said the fashion industry is totally off track in achieving its emission goals to be on a path to Paris, to a 1.5 degree world. And not only is it going to require us to act very quickly to meet those challenges, but we know now that the processes that we're trying aren't working. And we're not going to get it right the first time out of the gates either. And we're going to need to keep innovating really rapidly while we're also driving up our ambitions to be able to meet essentially these challenges, like living in a 1.5 degree reduction or improvement world.
Absolutely. And as I'm listening to you guys talk about sort of that rapid speed and iteration of the tech tools and platform, it really resonates well with AII too, because as we're thinking about how do we achieve this 2030 goal and beyond, it's only going to happen through rapid testing as well too. And when I came into AII, we were thinking a lot about the proven models that are out there, which is the foundation of this work. But there's going to need to be a lot of piloting and testing out of key solutions in order to decarbonize, to lower carbon in different areas, or test out different sources of energy. And I see this opportunity that we have to sort of borrow from that mindset that this can be a time to actually test and pilot out key issues and use the data insights on that to be able to learn, is this working? Is this helping us achieve those carbon reduction, in this case, water reduction as well? How are we building upon that and then iterating until we get it right, which is really when you look at programs like the mill improvement programs, that's how they started. They iterated until they got it right. They tested it out and piloted it across a subset of manufacturers, and then it got to a place where it was ready to prove. So I think a lot about this role that all of us will play here, and certainly with the members and partners that we work with, to really be able to be agile and test out, and take some risks early stage.
I think that's a great example of also where each of the different ecosystem players can play a unique and contributing role. I mean, it's absolutely critical for kind of a vanguard organization like Apparel Impact Institute to be trying and testing these new solutions. But then it really is up to sort of the community of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition to bring them to scale. And that we know is going to need to be supported by technology to scale quickly. And so I think that's a great example of, test and iterate, scale, support, where we each can play a unique role in creating change.
Yeah, and you really can look at even solutions across the life cycle and how each of our organizations touches the life cycle of idea, concept, proven model, ready for scale, and how all of us are sort of part of that, building that.
Yeah. The other thing that I was really excited about, we had a lot of conversations around, really pushing the industry, right? So actually saying this is what leadership looks like, and going out with some pretty big commitments, but also saying that, we want those companies that are going to be on the leading edge of this really pushing, right? We don't have time to wait, really, and I think that we were very intentional about that. But what that means is that, we have to bring all of our members along. We have to be able to support them in terms of, the tools and the insights and the programs, but we're also not going to wait, I think. And that was a pretty big signal that we were all really clear about, is that we're not going to wait for people to catch up. We want to make sure that we are pushing the edge, and that we are demonstrating leadership and we're supporting where we can, but that what is really needed in this industry is for us to move forward and to move fast.
I totally agree. And I think we all talked about this in terms of who we want to support and how we support. We would like to support everyone in becoming transformational, but we also recognize that some companies may just not be ready for that. And that may mean that we're not going to focus our resources on trying to get those who aren't ready to make changes, to get them up to the same standards as those who are. We're probably going to focus on those that are ready to make change and those that are going to go really fast. And that leadership is what has driven in the apparel and footwear industry. That's what's driven change before, and we want to make sure that we're really supporting that leadership and accelerating it.
And that's where the collective action piece comes in, because a lot of brands and manufacturers are going to benefit by the strength of leaders that are really helping to drive the programs that, if I look through the lens of AII, is we're really looking at scaling a preferred supply chain of, the suppliers who are really hitting a lot of the volume and a lot of the addressing a lot of the production in the industry. A lot of other partners are going to benefit from that, because we're sort of raising the whole bar, right? And so I think I've had some great conversations with brands who feel like they are under-resourced to take on some of this, and we are encouraging, you be at the table and be a part of this, because by being in collective action, your ability to actually step into leadership with other bigger, larger players is now even, more apparent than ever. And so I think it's a really good opportunity for also some of the folks who feel like, they can't be leaders to really maybe ask themselves in what way they can be.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point, though, because it's, we've talked so much about really diving into this collective action piece, right, and really partnering together. So getting companies to move away from, their proprietary assessments, their proprietary tools, their proprietary programs, because at this point, that's just not enough, right? It's not enough to transform the industry for everyone to be doing their own thing. It's really about how do we actually support everyone to work together much more deeply, much more intentionally, and scale this work in a way that, I don't think we've been able to before. So I'm excited, because I think the strategic plan is going to require that, right, for us to achieve this and really get companies to sit at the table, to your point, Lewis, and work together, with the data and the insights to really address some of these systemic problems. Through the development of the strategic plan, I think one of the things that the SAC has been looking at is not only how do you set really bold targets and really bold commitments, but how do you also couple that with membership requirements, right? How do we, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, but how do you really raise the bar, right? How do you set these bold targets out there and put a stake in the ground? And then I think support members with the right resources, the right tools, the right insights to drive collective action, but also really put a stake in the ground about what it means to be a member at the SAC and membership requirements, usage of the tools, scaling the tools, actually demonstrating performance improvement so that we are really helping and supporting the coalition to rise, I think, to raise the whole bar for the coalition all at once. But I also think that engaging with our members through this ecosystem and really, we talked a little bit about this member journey, but really showing our members or giving them a pathway for how they connect with each one of our organizations to help support their goals is really, for me, going to be the unlock, right? And it's something that we haven't really had in place before. We do now, and we have this solid foundation. So it's about, okay, well, how do you engage Higg Co and the team? How do we help support them to increase their adoption, use the adoption tools, et cetera? How do we leverage that data and that insights? How do we then connect them to the Apparel Impact Institute on programs and funding, and how do we scale all of that together? So I think it's really about being very clear about how we all work together and what each of our organizations provides. But that's also coupled with setting a bold vision and also setting member requirements that go hand in hand to move the entire coalition forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think the member journey that we talk about is going to be critical, and it's not just about providing that service to them, because that's critical too, but it's also about them giving the feedback loop to the member journey with us. And those partners who are working with all three of us are going to become so vital, I think, because they're going to be able to say, this is how this works for us and how it doesn't. And I think our ability to be able to ensure that we're also building the whole system around data collection, insights, collective action, scale impact solutions, and back, is going to be really important. And so I also, while I think there's a good bit of tremendous work we're going to be doing with our teams around providing that journey, it's absolutely got to be also in partnership with building it together. I did not pre-think this, so I hope I don't offend or are too nice. I think our leadership styles are hugely complementary. I think that we all bring sort of a different sensibility to how we approach the work. I know with Amina, for instance, that you're going to be kind, but you're going to be very honest and direct in addressing something that either we need to be looking at or working on together. And so I think your approach is a really great complementary one to where I sometimes may not be as direct. Culturally, I sort of talk around things, so I'm learning from you on how to also be like, to bring kindness, but also to be very direct about like what's needed and what's intended. And I think that's really good. And then Jason, I think our skill sets do complement in a lot of ways too, but I think one of the things that I love that I'm learning from you is really about the market as a whole. I think you have a really keen way of looking through your experience on sitting on different sides of this now, both inside a company that you founded in the apparel space, then with SAC and the coalition, now with this technology company. I think you have a really interesting holistic view of the problems and the solutions that I love. Just like I could spend a whole day just kind of like riffing with you on like how to solve for a lot of this. And so I think that brings a lot of intelligence and experience that to the table. So and myself, I don't know. I throw it back to you. What?
Handsome optimist.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, Jason and I have worked together a long time, and I feel like part of the reason we work well together is because we actually have really complementary skill sets. I think I always appreciate that Jason is really pushing, is willing to take risks where I think, I'm being a little bit more of a pragmatist and Midwestern. I feel like I'm a little less of a risk taker, but I think that what I also bring is that, I'm really into figuring out like how we do things and how we actually get things done. Jason's great at like the big ideas and really kind of pushing the boundaries and I think getting us to actually think beyond where we might be comfortable. And I think that's hugely important. Whereas I'm always really thinking through, okay, great, love that. How do we actually get it done? Right? And then with Lewis, what I've really loved the thought partnership. I think you bring a really an incredibly thoughtful perspective to the work and to the industry. And for me, I've really learned a lot in our conversations and talking to you. And I think we also have really good conversations where we are often riffing off each other, and kind of going back and forth, not necessarily knowing exactly where we want to get to, but then ultimately ending up in a place where we've come up with a good idea or a good solution that we both feel really good about. So I've appreciated that quite a bit.
Lewis, I do, while I joke that you're a handsome optimist, I do think that your optimistic view about what is possible and always bringing a perspective of how far could we take this? What could this look like without limits? I think that's really critical when you're trying to imagine a new future and figure out what are these investments or what are these programs that can help get us there. And Amina, I think you bring a real deep empathy to the whole industry and what it actually means at every level of the value chain to be a part of this change. And not just a appreciation of how hard it is, but also an appreciation of how much it means to those people that are working on this and how important this work is. And I think you really understand that at a core level in a way that can help them both understand that you recognize the difficulty, but you also recognize how important it is to them and to leaving a legacy for their children.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, too, I know also with the two of you, I can pick up the phone and say, I've got a problem, I've got an issue, I'm trying to figure something out. Can I bounce this off you, or how should this be handled? And I think we've created a really nice kind of environment between the three of us from our years of experience and now in this new relationship that we've been in for the last 2 years around really being able to look at each other as a resource with this work, because we do have such a shared approach and shared goals that, are, it makes it really, like you said, it's important to have people that you can call up and we have each other's back and we can like see it through a different lens and help support each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, for me personally, that's been so crucial, especially this year. Just stepping into this role, I don't think this year was quite what I imagined. But for me, it's been like invaluable to be able to rely on you guys, to have your support, and to be able to call you up and ask you questions and freak out as needed, but then figure out how we get through it. And I think it is so important, and I'm hugely appreciative of that, of your experience and your expertise, and just your advice and your counsel through all of this, because I do think that is what's going to allow us to be really successful.